Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for another one of your questions about work. And I love when this happens that we have a conversation that happens on Twitter about something and then the expert chimes in and it's like, wait, hold on. Let's get the longer version of that answer. So that's what we have today. For those of you who are here for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future of work, and we tackle roughly once a day one of your questions about work. And I'm here with Kat, who is an author. She's a facilitator. She's also an expert on friendship, among other things. And she worked in product design at Pandora and Slack in the past. And the question that erupted was one of these things that bothers me, but I couldn't quite articulate why. And I feel like you can help us understand this, which is I always get bothered when people just do the rote, how are you question? Because it's like the 45-minute answer you want to really know. And so the question today, and thank you so much for being here, is what is a better question to ask somebody than the general, how are you?
Yes, I'm so glad that you asked this question, right? Because there are so many better questions that are much more clear than just how are you. So with the question, how are you, there are two ways this can go, right? Because I think what people are trying to do when they ask that question is one of two things. One is to just give a greeting, like saying hello, pleasantries. And the other is actually caring and actually being willing to hear a perhaps 45-minute answer about how somebody is. And so I think that the alternatives that you choose really depend on being honest with yourself about what are you ready to do and what are you actually trying to do, right?
Yeah.
So if you're just starting a conversation and you just want to say hello, and then you're like, oh, what do I say after hello? You could go with something light. You could be like, what's shaking? What's the vibe today? What did you do this morning? Or like, what's up right now? The other thing I really like is going to like a little bit of a more like framing for the conversation of like, what's on your mind today? What do you want to talk about or not talk about? Is there anything you want to share with me, before we dive in? And to like, let it be okay for someone to say, no, I don't have anything extra I want to say. We can just get started.
Yeah.
And then if you really are actually interested in hearing about how somebody's doing, use different words that make it clear that you're not just saying hi,
The rote thing.
Not the rote thing. One question I really love for that category is like, how's your heart today? Or like, if you're in a time of crisis, how have you been coping? How have you been handling things? Then it's a little bit more clear that you really do want to hear how somebody is doing, and you're asking with different words that make it clear that you're not just saying hi.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, and I know you did your chart of various alternatives and conversation starters. One of the principles I got from that is just be intentional about having an intention for it. And the other is that different wording, framing questions are appropriate differently for different moments in the world, who you're speaking to, like how's your heart may work great with you and me, and less great if you're like in the heat of an M&A negotiation about something, just like, but there's always some way, like anything we should know before we dive in is another version of it. One other that came out in the Twitter conversation that I really liked was, it was something like, is there anything I should know about what's going on for you before we get started? So somebody can tell you, it's like there's something distracting, they just had an illness in the family or something like that. And then there are genuine people where I'm like, hey, I'm really curious how you've been doing. And each of those, as you point out, is something quite different. Before we wrap, any thoughts on when somebody does ask you the generic question? We don't control what questions others ask us. Somebody jumps in, they're like, hey, Kat, how are you? How you think about responding?
So there's a couple of ways that you can go with that. And then I have one other thing I want to say about questions at all. So if you really are just like, you're like, we're just doing the thing. We're just performing the little pleasantries of starting a conversation.
Kabuki theater.
It's just a theater. You just say fine, good, and then you move on if you just like don't want to deal with it. But the other thing I've been doing, honestly, and I find that it can provoke a better conversation, is to say, I'm taking a break from that question. Can I ask you something different? Or can we warm up with something different? And then the other person will usually be like, oh, curious.
Yeah,
they're a little surprised. And then you have another question on hand. Yeah. And my calendar has like all of these alternatives in there. The other thing too that I think is worth considering, and this is maybe just a point of reflection for folks who are listening, is asking yourself, do you need to ask a question right now at all? Or can you actually just make a statement? Like, why do you need someone to explain themselves to you before you start a conversation? Or is it perhaps just as fine to say, it's so good to hear your voice. I've really been looking forward to this conversation. I'm so glad that you work here, and I'm looking forward to connecting.
Can we
right
jump
now.
right in or whatever?
Exactly.
I call it the so moment, when it's like after the chit chat slows down. Everyone's like, so now we're going to get into whatever we're there to do. And one of the things I found for myself is that with people I know really well, I do this thing that sometimes throws them off a little, but now they know me, is like, if I know I'm talking about some specific topic with somebody and then they call me, I'll just pick up and be like, ask the next question in the topic. Like, okay, so how are we going to get back to that guy? And I don't say hello. I don't say anything else, because like they know me, they know it. It's like, let's just get down to it. And then I can have more time with my daughter and my wife and my son. And, but I do struggle with it. The other answer that I sometimes give, because honestly, sometimes it's true, is to genuinely answer how I am. I have to like kind of stop for a minute and check in. So the instant answer is often, I don't know. And then people are like, wait, how do you not know how you are? It's like, well, give me a second kind of thing. And even anything like that creates a moment of, this word is like, the authenticity word is so thrown around, but a moment of real, where it's like, you're not just following a script. We're not just mindlessly going through our day, I think is a blessing. So I really appreciate that you've given us a sense of how to think about that. Anything else you want to say, Kat, before we wrap?
If anybody wants help with this, I'm a total nerd and I geek out about this, and like check my blog, check my website, check my stuff. I have like lots of resources about how to have more real conversations.
All right, I do have one last question before we go. For your consulting practice or the work you're doing, what's the dream kind of client you want to hear from?
The people who have already with them or are pulling together large groups of people who then also want to cast ripples of change out.
I love that.
This work.
I love that. You want access to those groups. Okay, well, that is very clear. Kat, thank you. And for those of you watching for the first time, it's not advice, because we're not telling you what to do. We're giving you our own experiences, and you can, live your own life in the ways that you want. And we get the questions from all of you. And so please feel free to ask them anywhere on the internet, and to be continued. Thank you, Kat.